Well, morning all of you. My name is Ahmed Baig and I'm the co-founder of CISO Connect, which is a global platform for the security executives around the world. I was probably introduced in a very different way before. The alphabets that were repeated after my name are basically some of the certifications that I have. So I would also give an opportunity to the other panelists to introduce themselves and briefly also state about what kind of cybersecurity impact they would see in terms of the smart cities, and then I'll start with my questions regarding the smart city and its impact on the cybersecurity.
Yes, first good morning. My name is Jorge Sebastiao. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm an ICT expert within Huawei and been in the region for about 21 years. And obviously, many areas that I cover, but primarily ICT, architecture, cybersecurity, IoT, and quite a few others. And obviously, I think the challenges that we're referring here today, and have been slightly addressed by some of the earlier presenters, is that in the context of a smart, safe city, we have a much larger footprint of things that we're trying to connect together. So we have a much more complex network. So anytime we introduce complexity and a large footprint, obviously we increase the operational risk associated with it. So we need to have the necessary measures to control risk within that environment.
My name is Akin Adamson. I head up a small cybersecurity consulting business. I've got background in strategy consulting, where I started my career. I then moved into telecommunications, spent almost 10 years working with various telcos, before sort of moving sideways into transportation and smart mobility, and now into cybersecurity. I think, from my perspective, one of the interesting things about smart cities, smart technologies, and I'll talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, presenting tomorrow, is less about the technology. There's an awful lot of discussion about technology, connectivity, applications, sensors, but in fact, what's talked about a lot less, and I'm very pleased to see this, we mentioned a couple of times this morning already, is the people aspect of some smart environments, smart technologies, smart cities. And certainly from a cybersecurity perspective, again, when people talk about cybersecurity, very often they're thinking about technology, they're thinking about sort of software, viruses, firewalls, and in fact, one of the biggest weaknesses and vulnerabilities of cyber is actually people. So I think what I hope to do a little bit this morning is to explore the sort of people component of cybersecurity and also touch on the wider context tomorrow.
Well, picking on the presentations that were done before this panel, we had a very interesting presentation from Cisco, Etisalat, as well as IBM, and they all emphasized the importance of smart cities and the way they're being taken up by governments across the world. There's a huge investment that is being done in smart cities. Now, our smart cities require a lot of a different attitude by the people who are using it, because very simply, the smart cities take the cybersecurity to a different level, because it's no more about the data security alone, it's also about the safety of people when it comes to smart cities, because this is where the convergence of cyber and the physical world takes place. Because the moment you connect a IoT device or an industrial IoT device to a citywide network, you're actually connecting the cyber world to the physical world. So the impact that happens on the cyber world also impacts the actual physical world. For instance, if somebody manages to hack a traffic signal, the attack does enter into the physical world then. So my question to the panelists is, how exactly do you think vendors are responding to the convergence of cyber and the physical world, especially because there is some amount of inherent security that is expected by the users?
I think there is a lot of work that is being done in the area associated with cyber safety. Obviously, if we go back quite a number of years, I think the integration of logical, what we can sometimes refer to as data or information security and physical security, has become extremely important. So as we integrate those two, cyber actually brings that into context. As I mentioned, when we go to a smart city context, we increase substantially the footprint or the areas of potential risk. So in order to do that, you need to have a proper risk management approach to be able to address this in the most practical way. But I do agree also with my colleague in the sense that not only the technological aspect is important, but also the human aspect. Actually, when we look at security today, it's really about three primary elements, and it's always been those: people, process, and technology. When we talk about technology, I think we understand it and we know what needs to be done mechanically. When we talk about process, it's a little bit more difficult because process is actually a bit like the army. It's about discipline. It's the things that you must do regularly, time and time again, in order for security to actually take, we call it the operational aspects of security. When we talk about the user, well, it's a little bit more difficult because we have different types of users. You can have what you can call the internal users, which have knowledge about the system and actually can do substantial amount of damage by the knowledge they have. Sometimes called this rogue users with potential risks they can bring. But you also have what we sometimes call the clueless users, which is the average user that when they do an action, they don't always understand the impacts of the actions they take. But I still believe in this context that probably 60 to 70% of the risks are obviously contributed by the users, not by the technology or by the process. The good news is that obviously there's been a lot of innovation on the technology side, as well by introduction of things like blockchain, command and control center, big data for security to help to enhance a lot of these aspects from the technology. From the user, it's a little bit more difficult because you have to build awareness programs, you have to build capabilities that transform behavior. And obviously changing behavior takes time and it's extremely difficult to do.
I think I'd echo many of those thoughts. I just made a couple of notes. We do quite a lot of work in the oil and gas sector, and of course in this region that represents some critical infrastructure. A lot of the vendors of oil and gas plants will supply their products with industrial control systems, which many of them increasingly are saying that these systems are connected, can be plugged into broader networks, bringing additional functionality. Now, that's great, but of course as soon as you connect some of these systems, you introduce vulnerability as well. And when you talk to many of them about security and how secure some of the systems are, their response to that is, well, if you don't want the risk, then they can still work if you just unplug them, which is true. You can't just unplug some of these systems, they'll still work, just won't get the benefits. But that's quite a naive, I think, approach to cybersecurity. Of course, it doesn't take you anywhere towards a smarter society. I think the other area that warrants further scrutiny is probably software developers. And I think what we continue to see is that software developers treat security as a bolt-on, something to do after developing an application, rather than something that should be integral to developing new software. That's changing, but I think still very often, if you employ a software developer to develop an application for you, you need to make sure that security of the application is integral. And that brings me on to my third point, which I think is there's a responsibility here for purchasers of systems as well. It's not just about the vendors. Here we see many companies, governments, organizations buying systems, buying solutions recent months where companies have been hacked and quite substantial damage has been done. Senior executives have lost their jobs, really because they didn't have the right idea as to what they were buying and how to give it. So I think yes, vendors, both hardware and software, have a role to play, but I think purchasing by
I think one of the biggest challenges that we're facing in cybersecurity in general, not just in smart city cybersecurity, is the lack of resources. I mean, the lack of qualified staff is a big problem in cybersecurity itself, and added with the emerging technologies that are being used in smart cities, it sort of magnifies the problem to a higher level. So Huawei has a vendor and you has a consulting company. What exactly are you doing and how are you helping your customers to address this problem regarding the skill sets aspect of it?
Yes, I do agree that obviously there is a lack of skill sets on one side, but also a lack of qualified staff and being able to develop. In the area of staff development, obviously there's a lot of programs that have been introduced in terms of certifications, university, online training, online exams, to actually transfer the knowledge and to also qualify the staff to actually be ready to do that. Huawei, obviously being a good citizen in the various countries it operates today, Huawei operates over 170 countries. We typically have a very strong localization effort. So we bring in a good percentage of the workers from the local organizations in the local countries. And it is important to transfer to those resources or to that human capital the capabilities to perform the roles like cyber defense and others that are part of CISM.
Thank you. I think it's an incredibly good question. But of course, so the lack of skill sets is actually where a company like benefits, because where an organisation that doesn't have a set of cyber skill sets, they're on the bench, and it's a good market for us to deploy. But I think I'd like to sort of broaden that question as well into two parts. One is awareness, and one is actual sort of cyber skills. And coming back to my colleague's point about sort of clueless users, I think there's an enormous amount of kind of training that can be done to general employees around the importance of cybersecurity and some of the things that they can do to close the vulnerabilities of the organisation. I think that's probably more valuable than anything else that can be done. Now, of course, there are very specific cyber skills that are required, and I agree those are at a premium right now. I think the challenge that the industry faces, of course, is that it's a very fast-moving environment and skills quickly become outdated. So, when I'm talking to the members of my team, they're continuously on about how they can keep their knowledge, keep their skills current and up to date. But I think that's actually a big problem in a region like this, where you have a large transient workforce who maybe isn't going to live here for 10, 20 years, it's here for 2, 3, 4, 5 year contracts, and therefore doesn't necessarily get the kind of training or the upskilling that you get in other markets. So I think, particularly in this region, the currency of skill sets is certainly a big issue to address.
I would like to maybe add just one other small important aspect about the skill set. I think the skill set, in order to be able to be addressed successfully, needs to be addressed at 3 levels. And usually there's a term that was many years ago called CISA, stands for Security, Education, Training and Awareness. And I think if you build this in 3 pillars, then you can have a successful approach towards developing the required skill sets and security. When I talk about education, that really means the schools, colleges, etc. need to deliver the right skill sets. So cybersecurity needs to be introduced correctly on the various programs through accreditation and certification to actually deliver the right candidates so that organizations, cities, or vendors can use them properly. The second one is called training. I think training plays an important role because once you finish your education programs, you need to develop skill sets that are more technology, product, or vendor specific. So the vendors then develop further these capabilities by introducing either vendor specific or API specific technology knowledge. And the last one is obviously awareness, which is geared towards the end users. And these are much shorter programs, much more practical programs that deliver the basic skills for the users. And I think this one requires a very constant refresh because the types of attacks and the nature of the attacks that are possible today changes on a daily-by-daily basis. So you need to have a mechanism to deliver this information and this news in a very dynamic way, sometimes through screensavers, emails, bulletin board systems, or others, in order to achieve the right objectives.
The organizational digital transformation that's happening everywhere sort of is giving a unique opportunity to the IT as well as the security executives to reach out to the management. Now you have organizations or what I call as the external partners, business partners. You get a unique opportunity now to talk to business, not just the IT heads or the security heads of a company, because now IT is becoming a sort of center of the business itself. I mean, it's no more a support service in most businesses. It is running the core business activities of a business to generate revenue and for growth. How are you utilizing this opportunity to reach out to the business heads in the organization to help build their digital strategy secure from base up? Because security is always taken up as a later initiative. Instead, it has to be integrated and embedded within the digital strategy of the organization. So what is the role that Huawei and you as a consulting company play?
It's an important aspect. Anytime we actually help an organization do digital transformation, I think digital transformation comes from two aspects of what I call business value. First one is what I call business value below the line. And sometimes we tend to refer to business value below the line as optimization. So when you introduce technology, is you want business to do things in a better, more optimized way. The second one is what we call value above the line. So that's where you actually use technology to deliver new products, new services, or innovation towards the business. So you enable, for example, in the context of smart, safe city, for governments to offer services that they were not able to do before. One example is monetizing of city data, so that enables to do that. Now, in order to be able to achieve this in a successful way from a cyber perspective, you need to introduce the right programs, both in the optimization side, which is the value below the line, and as well as on the innovation side. So, however, what we realize is that we need to make that part of all the phases that are part of the digital transformation. Security is not something that you bolt on at the end and you expect to actually achieve the benefits. However, most organizations, individuals, they see security, oh, this is not going to happen, so therefore, why should I invest? So a lot of educational needs to go on through the entire process to achieve the right objective.
I think the way that we would look at it is that sort of cybersecurity is a risk. It's a risk to any business. I think a few years ago, that risk was typically owned by the IT department, the IT director, be the person who would be responsible for managing cybersecurity. I think that's changed over the last few years, and again, because of some of the high-profile hacks, I think it's been recognised that this isn't an IT problem, it's not an IT risk, this is a corporate risk, which means that increasingly we're not working with IT directors, we're working with CEOs, CFOs, and COOs to address not just cybersecurity, but more broadly information security. It's really cybersecurity, subset of information security. And I think, and the reason for that is quite simple, which is that CEOs, CFOs, and COOs can all lose their jobs if a company's hacked valuable data is lost. It's not just the responsibility of the CI. I think the other component to this is that really putting in place a robust, solid response to address the cybersecurity is that it requires not just technology change and process change, it actually requires cultural change. And of course cultural change really is only possible to lead from the top. You can do it further down the organisation. It's almost impossible to lead cultural change from the CIO position. So I think in answer to the original question, which is how do we engage across the broader organisation, I think what's happening actually is the broader organisation is engaging with us because they see this risk as a corporate risk, not just a teams.
One last comment I would like to also add here is actually important, is that governments are playing a much active role that they did not play before. And I think if we look at a good example of this active role, is the legislation that has been recently passed in Europe. So today, if you're an organization, regardless of where you're located, if you actually end up doing business with Europe at one stage or another, the penalties that you have if you do not address these cyber issues correctly can be quite substantial to the organization. So I invite you to actually look into these new legislations that have been passed and the fact that as individuals you have to actually contribute towards compliance with these laws and regulations as well.
Thanks, George. I think you just highlighted the point that is my next question to panelists. Most of the existing regulations are in place keeping in mind the data security and the information security in place, but smart cities sort of do a little more than that. I mean, there's no specific standard or regulation in place now for smart cities or intelligent systems. Now, how do you see this area evolving, and how do you see this changing region-wise? Now, you work in different regions. How do you see the maturity or initiatives by governments in terms of getting cyber laws specific to smart city areas?
I think the areas of smart city are still quite embryonic in the sense that there's not a specific legislation today that is designed towards smart city. However, because the footprint of smart city is so large, the laws are already affecting smart city in one way or the other. One is the privacy laws. The other one is, for example, healthcare laws like the HIPAA standard, because obviously in smart city there's a healthcare component, and all laws similar to the one that has just got recently introduced in Europe. However, because technology obviously moves extremely fast, laws tend to lag behind, usually somewhere between 3 to 5 years at least, before they actually reach the level of maturity in which they're applicable, the technological evolutions that actually take place. So I think the legislation needs to keep pace a little bit more, but it's always going to lag behind somehow.
Thank you. I think, again, I absolutely agree. I don't think that the legislation is going to be the thing that improves cybersecurity in the smart city space. Just governments and the legal process just takes too long, especially in an environment where change is so rapid. And I think smart cities as well is too much of a broad topic to actually legislate for. I think there are elements within smart cities that will see legislation to trickle through slowly, but following innovation. I actually think probably that the biggest driver for improving cybersecurity in the smart city domain is probably going to be the market. As I said earlier, it'll be people like you that are wanting to differentiate themselves as smart city product, smart city services or applications, and making sure that security is a differentiator in those products and services. People will find them more attractive if they're secure. And likewise, if you're buying smart city products and services, actually asking the right questions around how secure each product or service actually is. Those that treat security seriously, build it in up front, will be the ones that I think will succeed at it. The ones that don't there's not the ability to provide in terms of.
One approach I'd like to maybe change a little bit the course of people's mentality is that sometimes Dubai tends to do things a little bit different than everybody else. If you look at some legislation that was passed recently in the Emirates, was actually an open data law, which is kind of the reverse of security sense, in the sense that actually it's forcing business to share their information rather than to keep it private. So I think this is maybe an interesting approach to have a look at it.
I think it's, before I get into that, I think I would like to go back to the point that you stated. I totally agree. Compliance is never equivalent to security. Just by complying to some regulation or standard, it doesn't guarantee that you're the most secure or you're secure from your competitor or any other organization. But what is more important and what you will see in the future typically is you'll never see, again, a cyber law which is for a smart city. It could be on vertical basis. Coming back to the point of healthcare that you stated, you would see more vertical laws that are related to a particular industry and the use of smart technologies in that industry. So that is what you would see probably from the regulatory framework point of view. But what is more important is also the safety that would come in picture, because when it comes to cyber physical systems, you're not just talking about data and information anymore. Like for instance, if let's say an autonomous car gets into an accident, the question here is, whom would you hold liable? The driver, the car manufacturing company, or the software programmer who wrote the program? I mean, these are the questions that you would still have no answers for, and I don't think we have answers here by ourselves. Before I conclude the session, I would like to give a chance to the audience to ask questions if you have any for the panelists or me.
That's fine. I think I can throw my voice.
Yeah, sure.
Just curious, because there's a movement, if you look at Europe, for instance, they're considering introducing a label whereby basically you certify each and every connected device which you're going to deploy all across Europe. So while I tend to disagree a bit on the legislation part, I agree that just having a stamp perhaps is not enough for security needs, but I think it also contributes to the education part as well, because once you do have a regulation in place, at least something strikes in your brain when you're actually about to deploy something. Coming back to the label part, because the way, as you've mentioned, as some of the other colleagues over here have mentioned, it's adopting a lot of new technology at a fairly feverish pace, I would say. Don't you think that Dubai as well could actually use something like security label specifically and specially for critical infrastructure projects where you are actually connecting different things? And if I take a very trivial example, smart meters, for example. I know it's a very small part of the larger energy system, but what do you gentlemen feel? Shouldn't there be some sort of a label in place for UAE or GCC at large, which ensures that minimum level of security for those connected devices which are being deployed in the field? Thank you.
I think before I hand over, I just want to bring up what AI does. Every device that is used here in UAE is actually vetted and a sort of labeled by TRA before you introduce that into the market. But I still want to give opportunity to
I think there is a good work being done in the region, exactly for the things that you mentioned about. And this work is actually specifically being done in what we call critical infrastructure systems. So what do we mean here by critical infrastructure? It actually varies a lot, but you can say that critical infrastructure today is classified in about 12 different areas, including, for example, financial systems, electrical, water supply, transport, just to name a few. So labs have been created in which the tools that are being deployed into these systems will be tested. There will be a label put against them in terms of validating the safety or minimal acceptance of safety for those devices. And only the devices that meet that criteria. And when I say the devices, it's not just the devices themselves. These elements of the network that will actually participate along with these devices as well.
Thank you. Again, I think that what you described, yes, you're right, it's being put in place in different markets around the world. It will have a benefit. But I think that the type of structure that you're describing is one major, it's a flaw, but the downside, which is that it will only ever set minimum standards of security. So yes, it might stop or might discourage people from buying products that are inherently insecure, but will it drive improved security for sort of more advanced products? I don't think that's what the scheme does that. I'll give you a parallel in the automotive industry, where most countries around the world have minimum standards for vehicle safety. So you can't stop a car unless it's got or maybe it's brakes or whatever it is. Those are minimum standards. So that's what the government says. I'm very positive of that. But of course, automotive manufacturers can go much further. Employ many sophisticated safety systems in cars, which go well beyond that minimum specification. And a lot of them don't. Some of them do. Some of them do because they see that it gives them a differentiation in the marketplace, and they can actually sell those cars much safer. So I think, yes, the minimum standards work, but actually what we want to try and do is encourage people to go well beyond that and encourage systems of solution, hardware and software producers to actually make the systems even more secure and use that as a
Actually, I find the car analogy extremely funny and extremely useful because I remember the first time I arrived in the Middle East a little bit over 20 years ago, and I obviously visited pretty much every country from here to Pakistan and India. And I remember at the time arriving in Pakistan to speak at the bankers for cybersecurity. I arrive at the airport, I sit in the car, coming from Canada, my first reaction was like this. Then I turn to my driver and says, "Where is the seatbelt?" The guy looks at me, "Optional." Okay, it was 20 plus years ago, so what it really means at the time, the seatbelt, which suddenly cost me $1, $5 maximum, was an optional device. Most of you probably actually drove here today in a quite sophisticated car. Maybe there's not only a seatbelt, there's an airbag, it's traction control, ABS, and maybe even collision avoidance system. That means the car brakes in case you fall asleep or you doze or you drive too close to the other one. But I think one is even more important than that, which is getting back to the user aspect. Even if you have all these systems working together, the car is extremely sophisticated, you can still manage to kill yourself. And the simple reason for that is that if you're reckless about your approach towards driving, no matter how sophisticated the car and how many of these systems actually collaborating together, it will not necessarily drive you the safety that you expect.
I think this is one of the very interesting topics which probably we can go on discussing, but in the interest of time, do we have time for another question? Does anybody have another question here? Okay, I think I would like to thank my panelists. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Akin. Thank you for your time. And thank you all of you.